The truth is brutal. Every gallon you pump, every pill you swallow, every search you type, every dollar you borrow, someone designed the rules long before you were born. One man, one blueprint, one empire, and you are still inside of it. This story doesn't start in Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Washington, or big tech headquarters. It starts in 1870 in a grimy, smoke-choked Cleveland. A 31-year-old bookkeeper with cold eyes and a quiet voice controlled just 4% of America's oil refining. Nobody feared him. Nobody understood him. Nobody saw what was coming. His name, John D. Rockefeller. And you're about to learn how he built the architecture of modern corporate power, how he created the playbook Amazon, Google, Meta, JPMorgan, Pfizer, and nearly every global giant still used today, how his system didn't die when Standard Oil was broken up. It mutated, it expanded, it swallowed everything. You think you're living in 2025, but you're living inside Rockefeller's operating system, because this isn't just history. This is the blueprint of domination. And you, yes, you, move through it every single day without realizing it. Let's begin. Rockefeller understood something no one else did. You don't win by competing. You win by controlling every inch of the supply chain, every gate your competitors must pass through, every weakness they depend on. He knew that if he owned the rails, the barrels, the refineries, the distribution, the shipping, then every competitor was paying him even when they thought they were fighting him. This was step one of the Rockefeller playbook: vertical integration, control everything, own everything, keep every profit margin inside your fortress. While his competitors bought barrels for 25 cents, Rockefeller built his own factories and made them for 15. While others begged railroads for fair freight rates, Rockefeller negotiated secret rebates that crushed them. While others scrambled for storage, he built warehouses across the country. And while they fought for scraps, he plotted for domination. You need to understand the brutality of this method. When you cut costs so ruthlessly that your competitors cannot match you, you decide who survives. You decide who starves. And Rockefeller didn't just want an advantage, he wanted annihilation. That's how, by 1880, he controlled 90% of American oil refining. 90%. One man, one company, one empire absorbing everything in its path. But here's the part that hits you in the gut. Step one didn't just create cheap kerosene. It created the template for Amazon's modern power. Amazon owns the warehouses, the trucks, the planes, the last mile delivery, the website, the cloud, AWS, $90 revenue, the payment system, the data. Every slice of the chain that a competitor needs, Amazon already owns it. That's Rockefeller's method. New century, same DNA. Google owns search, video, mobile OS, hardware, cloud, advertising. If you want to compete with Google, you compete inside Google's world. Rockefeller wrote that playbook. And you live under it. But domination doesn't stop at owning the chain, because once you control your own supply, you start hunting down everyone else's. That's step two. Horizontal consolidation. Buy everything or destroy everything. Rockefeller executed his masterpiece in 1872 in an event so devastating it became known as the Cleveland Massacre. He approached every refinery in the city. They had two options: sell to Standard Oil or die in the coming price war. When they refused, Rockefeller unleashed a strategy so violent it reshaped American capitalism. He sold oil below cost. He lit money on fire just to suffocate his rivals. Within 3 months, he controlled 25 of 26 Cleveland refineries. Let that sink in. 3 months, one city, one empire rising. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American refining. 90%. You cannot compete when your supplier, your transporter, and your distributor are the same person, and that person is Rockefeller. You think this strategy disappeared? Look at Amazon's acquisition spree. Whole Foods, Ring, Zappos, Twitch, MGM. Look at Google, YouTube, Android, Waze, Nest, DeepMind. Look at Meta, Instagram, WhatsApp. And when they can't buy someone, they copy them, underprice them, absorb their users, destroy them quietly. That is the Cleveland Massacre, modernized. But Rockefeller's power wasn't just economic. He invented the corporate superstructure that every giant uses today. That's step three, the trust. A holding company, a legal Hydra, a structure where one central entity controls dozens of smaller companies, all appearing separate but moving as one organism. In 1882, Rockefeller's lawyers created the Standard Oil Trust. It was the first of its kind, one entity that secretly controlled everything. The blueprint for Alphabet owning Google and YouTube, Meta owning Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, JPMorgan Chase owning layers of financial entities, Berkshire Hathaway owning hundreds of companies under one umbrella. The modern corporation is Rockefeller's invention, and you, your job, your bank, your phone, your medicine, your feeds, you live inside corporate architecture he designed. But power is never secure until you control the rules. That leads to step four, regulatory capture. Do not fear regulators. Own them. Rockefeller mastered it. He pushed for railroad regulations that favored Standard Oil. He helped define kerosene quality standards that only his factories could meet. He didn't compete in markets. He shaped the rules of the markets. Modern corporations perfected this. Pharma funds the FDA through user fees. Tech companies write privacy laws. Banks wrote exemptions in Dodd-Frank. The U.S. government has, for decades, relied on the very companies it claims to regulate. Rockefeller didn't just build a company. He built a method of bending government around corporate interests. But the most genius step was the final one. Step 5, philanthropy as influence. When Rockefeller donated $250 million to create the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913, $7 billion in today's money, he wasn't just buying goodwill, he was buying the future, funding medical schools, steering scientific research, shaping education, dictating what becomes mainstream knowledge. The result? The modern pharmaceutical model, the drug-first medical system, university research dependent on foundations. Legitimacy purchased, not earned. And today, the Gates Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Buffett's pledged fortune. Billionaires didn't invent this move, Rockefeller did. And you live in the world shaped by it. But here's where the story becomes almost unbelievable. In 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to break up Standard Oil. 34 companies, a government victory, a triumph of antitrust justice. Except it made Rockefeller richer. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was $600 per share. After splitting into dozens of companies, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Sohio, the combined value skyrocketed to $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's wealth tripled. The man they tried to destroy became the richest individual in modern history, worth $400 billion in today's dollars, more than Musk plus Bezos plus Gates combined. And over the next century, those 34 companies quietly merged back together. Exxon and Mobil in 1999, Chevron absorbing its cousins, BP absorbing Amoco and Sohio. The empire reassembled itself without anyone noticing. The breakup wasn't the end, it was camouflage. His system survived by wearing new faces, and you still live under it. You think Rockefeller's story ends with oil? No. Oil was just the entry point. His real invention, the one you still live under, is the architecture of corporate power, the blueprint for controlling markets, governments, and even thought itself. And in 2025, that blueprint is everywhere around you. Let's go deeper into the machine you're trapped inside. Standard Oil didn't disappear in 1911. It mutated, it multiplied, it embedded itself into every sector that mattered. And its logic, Rockefeller's cold, mathematical logic, became the backbone of modern capitalism. The empire didn't die, it scaled, because you're not just dealing with a man, you're dealing with a set of rules, a formula for absolute dominance, a repeatable algorithm that has outlived its creator by more than a century. And you are inside the output of that algorithm right now. Let's break down how the 5 steps evolved into the modern world you think is free, competitive, innovative. But underneath, it's Rockefeller all over again. Rockefeller's obsession with owning every link in the chain wasn't about efficiency. It was about suffocation. If he controlled barrels, railroads, refineries, shipping, and distribution, then a competitor wasn't competing. They were renting their survival from him. Today, Amazon has taken this to a level even Rockefeller couldn't have imagined. When you click Buy Now, you aren't just purchasing a product. You're entering a system where Amazon owns the warehouse storing your item, the robots sorting it, the trucks moving it, the planes flying it, the driver delivering it, the website hosting it, the payment service processing it, and the cloud servers running it. Amazon doesn't compete with the market. It is the market, just like Standard Oil. Google owns the entire digital pipeline, from search to mobile operating systems, to cloud infrastructure, to hardware, to analytics. You can't escape Google's territory because you live inside it. And behind it all, the original idea belongs to Rockefeller. Take every step of production and swallow it, but nothing compares to how he used step 2. When Rockefeller launched the Cleveland Massacre, he didn't hide his intentions. He gave every competitor a simple choice: sell or die. And when they refused, he bled them dry with predatory pricing. He turned markets into traps. No matter what they did, they lost. And you see this everywhere in 25. Meta buys Instagram and WhatsApp. Google buys YouTube and Android. Amazon buys everything from Whole Foods to MGM. JPMorgan buys collapsing banks. When buying is impossible, copying is the new weapon. Instagram copies Snapchat. Facebook copies TikTok. Amazon copies every best-selling product and buries the original seller. It's the same massacre, just digital. Because step 2 isn't just about eliminating competitors. It's about eliminating the idea of competition itself. And that's the world you live in, where giants don't fight fair because they don't have to. But Rockefeller's true genius wasn't economic domination. It was structural domination. Before Rockefeller, companies were isolated entities. After Rockefeller, corporations became hydras, many heads, one brain. The Standard Oil Trust allowed Rockefeller to control dozens of separate companies without appearing to control them. It was nothing short of a legal invisibility cloak. Today, that invisibility cloak wraps around everything you touch. Alphabet, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, JPMorgan Chase, BlackRock. Every conglomerate is a descendant of Rockefeller's 1882 invention, They present themselves as networks of independent entities, but behind the curtain, one structure binds everything. One brain, one command system, one center of gravity. This is the architecture you operate inside every time you open your phone, get on the internet, pay a bill, visit a doctor, or even search for information. But step 4 is where the machine becomes truly inescapable for you. Rockefeller understood something no business school could teach. If you can bend the rules, you never break them. Instead, you break everyone else. He funded lobbyists, influenced railroad regulations, helped craft standards only he could meet. He weaponized government to freeze competitors out of markets. Today, regulatory capture is standard operating procedure. Pharma funds the FDA through user fees. The very companies being regulated pay the regulators. Is that oversight or ownership? When patents are about to expire, pharma companies lobby for extensions. When competitors emerge, they influence legislation to bury them. Banks write financial regulations. Tech companies write privacy laws. Corporations hire former regulators and send their own executives into regulatory agencies. The revolving door spins faster every year. And you live inside a world where corporations write the rules that govern them. Rockefeller didn't invent corruption. He invented efficiency in corruption. But his most elegant, seductive, dangerous weapon was step 5. When Rockefeller became the most hated man in America, he didn't fight back. He rebranded through philanthropy. He created the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913 with $250 million, equivalent to $7 billion today. But this wasn't generosity. This was strategy. He used philanthropy to steer public health, medical education, and scientific research. He funded universities. He shaped curricula. He influenced what doctors learned, what researchers studied, what treatments became standard. He didn't just change medicine. He built the modern pharmaceutical model. Drug-based treatment became the norm because Rockefeller-backed institutions trained generations of doctors to see it that way. Holistic medicine was labeled unscientific. Pharmaceutical companies, many emerging from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, exploded into trillion-dollar industries. And today, the Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and others use the same tactic. Influence packaged as generosity. You live inside a public narrative written by private wealth, and this is where Rockefeller transcends history. When the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil's breakup in 1911, newspapers celebrated. Politicians patted themselves on the back. America believed it had defeated the monster, but Rockefeller owned shares in all 34 new companies. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Sohio. These weren't fragments. They were offspring. Before the breakup, Standard Oil shares were worth $600. After the breakup, the combined value skyrocketed to $2,000. Rockefeller's wealth tripled. The government tried to shatter him. Instead, they made him invincible. And over the next century, those companies merged back together. Exxon and Mobil, Chevron absorbing Standard Oil pieces, BP absorbing Amoco. The empire rebuilt itself slowly, quietly, without public attention. You live in a world where the monster never died. It regenerated. The Rockefeller name isn't trending on social media. It isn't plastered across skyscrapers. The family does not flaunt wealth. They don't need to. Their influence flows through foundations, think tanks, policy groups, financial institutions, and research networks. Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Rockefeller Family Fund, David Rockefeller Fund, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, university boards, medical foundations, energy policy networks. David Rockefeller, grandson of John D., lived to 101. He served as chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, built the Trilateral Commission, and remained one of the most powerful geopolitical figures of the 20th century. The family wealth isn't loud, it's layered, distributed across trusts, foundations, and influence hubs. You live under the shadows of a dynasty that learned how to rule quietly. You think the modern world is different, but every company dominating your life runs Rockefeller's playbook. Vertical integration, Amazon controls your shopping, logistics, payment processing, cloud services. Horizontal consolidation, Google buys every major platform or buries rivals with algorithmic force. The trust, Alphabet, Meta, JPMorgan, BlackRock, corporate hydras. Regulatory capture, pharma writes drug laws, tech writes privacy laws. Banks write financial policy. Philanthropy as influence. Billionaires steering public education, a medical policy, and global health. The playbook didn't disappear. It scaled globally. And you are living inside the final evolution of it. You can hate Rockefeller. You can admire him. But you cannot deny him. Because when you pump gas, when you swallow a pill, when you take out a loan, when you scroll through apps, when you buy anything online, when you enter a hospital, when you search for information, when you use electricity, energy, medicine, technology, you are interacting with a world designed by one man's decisions. But to truly grasp the gravity of the world you live in, you have to see what Rockefeller really built. It wasn't a monopoly, it wasn't a company, it wasn't even an empire. It was a template, a blueprint for shaping reality itself. And every major institution around you has been copying that template for 150 years straight. This is the part where you understand why you can't escape it. The blueprint of unbreakable power. Rockefeller learned something early. You don't dominate by being the best. You dominate by becoming unavoidable. When every road leads back to you, choice becomes an illusion. Customers think they're choosing, competitors think they're fighting, regulators think they're correcting, but in reality, they're all operating inside the world you built. That's the machine you're living in today. Amazon is unavoidable. Google is unavoidable. Apple is unavoidable. JPMorgan is unavoidable. Pfizer is unavoidable. These corporations don't fight for your loyalty. They engineer your dependence. And that strategy is the purest extraction of Rockefeller's thinking. He wasn't trying to win markets. He was trying to erase the very possibility of anyone else winning. And in 2025, that strategy is the operating system of your entire economy. Your life in the Rockefeller operating system. When you wake up and touch your phone, you're in it. When you open Google Maps, you're in it. When you buy groceries, your payment network runs through a Rockefeller descendant financial system. When you drive a car, the fuel traces back to companies born from Standard Oil. When you check out online, Amazon's logistics system is involved, whether you see it or not. When you take medicine, you're participating in a healthcare structure shaped by Rockefeller's educational reforms and pharmaceutical influence. The brilliance of his playbook is that you cannot avoid it. You move through it automatically, seamlessly, silently. You're not a customer. You're not a user. You're not a citizen. Inside his system, you are a participant, and participants don't realize they're inside a controlled environment. The playbook was never about oil. It was always about systems. Oil was step one. Control was the real product. Rockefeller understood before anyone else that the true currency of power is infrastructure. If you control the pipes, whether they carry oil, information, money, medicine, or data, you control everything that flows through them. Today, data pipelines replaced oil pipelines. Cloud servers replaced refineries. Algorithms replaced railroads. But the structure, the method, the psychology, all Rockefeller. Vertical integration became digital integration. Horizontal consolidation became acquisition sprees. The trust became global conglomerates. Regulatory capture became corporate governance fusion. Philanthropy became narrative control. Every part of his strategy survived. Every part evolved. Every part controls you. The reason you can't opt out. Try avoiding oil. You can't. Try avoiding big tech. You can't. Try avoiding big pharma. You can't. Try avoiding the banking system. You can't. Try avoiding global supply chains. You can't. That's not the result of markets. That's the result of design. A design written by a man who saw capitalism as a chessboard and everyone else as pieces. He didn't want a company. He wanted a world where every major decision passed through gates he built, and in a way, he succeeded. The empire reassembled. The breakup of Standard Oil wasn't a defeat, it was a metamorphosis. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Sohio, Marathon, and dozens of others. They weren't fragments, they were seeds. Seeds that grew into the giants that still power your economy. When Exxon and Mobil merged in 1999, the world barely blinked. When Chevron absorbed other Standard Oil pieces, nobody noticed the lineage. When BP bought Amoco and Sohio, the empire knitted itself back together silently. 100 years after the breakup, the children of Standard Oil dominate global energy once again. Rockefeller didn't lose. He won slowly. The dynasty that never died. The Rockefeller family today doesn't flaunt wealth. Their power is systemic, not flashy. They sit behind foundations, think tanks, financial boards, environmental initiatives, medical councils, international commissions. They don't need to run companies. They influence the people who run them. David Rockefeller was shaping global finance while most billionaires were still in diapers. The Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, Chase Manhattan Bank. His handprints are on half of America's modern economic architecture. The family's wealth is officially $11 billion. But the real influence, it's spread across institutions that shape the world you live in. The final stage, you are the product of the playbook. This is where the truth hits hardest. You think you make choices, you think you're free, you think you participate in a competitive economy. But the Rockefeller playbook engineered a world where competition is an illusion, choice is manufactured, and freedom is shaped by structures you never voted for. His system doesn't force you, it surrounds you. Quietly, efficiently, permanently, and you navigate it every day like a fish swims in water, never realizing the water is there. So what do you do with this? You don't escape the system. You understand it, you see it, you recognize the patterns, you watch how power moves, you watch how companies copy his methods. You understand that the world around you didn't evolve. It was built, engineered, structured with precision, and once you see the blueprint, You stop being blind inside it. Rockefeller didn't just shape the past, he shaped your present and your future. This isn't the story of an oil man. This is the story of the man who built the skeleton of modern power. The man whose fingerprints are on your apps, your medicine, your bank, your energy, your knowledge, your laws. The man who created the world you wake up in every morning. You don't see Rockefeller, but you see his system everywhere, because you are living inside the Rockefeller playbook. And now, you finally know it. Welcome to a world designed by the guru.